Coming up on the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast.
What we've done with our food system back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, we discovered fossil fuel fertilizers and went, wow, we can grow food so much quicker. We just dump this, fossil fuel based fertilizer that comes from natural gas that's getting a whole lot more expensive really quickly right now. Dump it into the soil and make everything grow a whole lot quicker.
Mm.
But not only, when it grows quicker, it doesn't extract as much nutrition. And when you grow things quickly again and again in the same soil, it depletes, and the fertilizers accelerate the loss of topsoil, and there's no diversity, there's no microbiome diversity in the soil, so that the actual nutrient content of that food is getting worse and worse and worse. So we just band-aid it to make the label look better with a few, bit of fortification, but it really doesn't help that much.
Hello, and welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I'm Brian Grin, and I'm here to give you actionable tips to get your body back to what it once was 5, 10, even 15 years ago. Each week, I'll give you an in-depth interview with a health expert from around the world to cut through the fluff and get you long-term sustainable results. This week, I interviewed the owner of Optimizing Nutrition, Marty Kendall. This was the second time I've had Marty on the podcast, and we discussed the importance of nutrient-dense foods, how minerals play a role in your health, along with what's the deal with seed oils, dangers of fat and carbs combined, the importance of preparing your own food, and what role coffee and alcohol will play in your health. I really enjoyed my interview with Marty. I hope you do too. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. On for a second time, Marty Kendall. Welcome to the show.
How you doing, Brian? Great to chat again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a little over a year and a half, and you must be doing some things right. You look younger.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah.
I quit the day job in December. I'm a part-time casual engineer now, and diving into the nutrition stuff. So yeah, living the dream, and just trying to walk the talk and get out on the bike and lift weights and eat as well as I can in the real world, and yeah, loving life.
Yeah, well, when you can focus a little bit more time on those things, right? You start to look younger.
Yeah, all the knowledge and theory is one thing, but actually applying one thing at a time, I learn, is just, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
One little tiny habit and integrate it into your life, and then chip away at the next one.
Yeah, for sure. And it's easy to talk about it, but the implementation is the key. So what have you been up to? I know we talked a little bit on before we got on live, but you're with obviously optimizingnutrition.com.
Yep.
Love your site as a resource. And I was looking through your blog, and I know you mentioned regarding, well, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and, sort of how you got into all this?
Yeah. I'm an engineer by day. Happened to marry Monica, who happens to be a type 1 diabetic. And all of a sudden we learned a lot about insulin and blood sugars and nutrition, and way back before that, I grew up in an SDA family, Seventh-day Adventist, and they're very nutrition focused and very religiously nutrition focused. So my family left the SDA church back when I was about 10. But I think that gives me a really interesting, like, the juxtaposition of being an engineer, trying to help my wife manage type 1 diabetes, knowing that so much of the nutrition advice is complete trash and doesn't work and is pretty much the worst thing you can do. And then growing up in the hub of belief-based nutrition, I'm quite skeptical of nutrition. And as an engineer, I love data. I want to see data. Data is truth. So I just want to see more data to understand what the cheat codes of nutrition are that cut through the dogma and belief and conflicts of interest and financial motivation, and that's just rife in our food systems. So yeah, that's, I quit the day job in December because I just got so obsessed with this and figured I could give it a crack and do what I love, and here I am chatting to you.
Yeah, that's great. And I do agree. I think just being in the health business and having a podcast all about health and wellness, I mean, you can drive yourself crazy with all the different rhetorics that are out there regarding what to eat and when to eat. And it has me second guessing half the time what I'm doing.
What do I do? When do I eat? What should I
Yeah,
eat?
I
What's
mean,
perfect?
and I think, one of the things too is like you can test yourself on like, I did a hair mineral test. I've done,
Yeah,
I, just did a full panel, blood panel, and it's like you could do genetic testing on
yeah,
certain things, maybe. So I'm curious, like, I love your blog and a lot of the stuff that you talk about is really backed with science,
yeah,
and backed on, a big thing is satiety. Maybe
yeah.
explain a little bit about how you analyze satiety within different nutrients and foods.
Yeah, I'm just going back to your point there about, there's so many things you can test and
Yeah.
everybody's got a test and then a magic supplement that'll cure that ill that you didn't know you had before you listened to that sponsored podcast. It's just crazy. Everybody wants to sell you, convince you you're sick and then fix you with their expensive one pill that'll
Yeah.
cure your ills. But yeah, no, I think one of the biggest things in nutrition, it's what you eat and when you eat to some degree, because if you're eating too often, you're eating too much, and what you eat and when you eat are definitely interrelated. But satiety is basically, I've been on a quest to understand what are the foods that make us satisfied and happy. What are the foods that our body needs that contain the nutrients we need to thrive. So really, the more I dig into it, I see that it's all about our body just keeps on eating until it gets enough of the nutrition it needs,
Mm.
particularly protein. But when you dig further, it's all the other minerals and vitamins that we need enough of. So if we don't get enough of those from our modern, hyper palatable, hyper processed, um, ultra processed crap diet, we just keep on eating. And I think that's a very simple way of understanding it. And then with enough data, you can then understand what are the factors that are quantifiable in that, you know, particularly protein is the big one, but also we see significant responses to potassium and sodium and calcium and folate and even fiber. It's hard to overeat a higher fiber diet. So as we can use that information to cut through the dogma, to design a diet, to optimize foods, to rank foods and say, is this better than this? And what should I try next?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was just pulling up some of your articles, the one regarding minerals.
Yeah,
I think that's something I think it's something that gets overlooked sometimes.
yeah,
And I actually just did a hair mineral test, and through upgraded formulas,
yeah,
and I actually had someone interpret that chart because it was actually
yep,
fairly confusing to
yeah,
understand.
yeah.
And he was really good. He was actually on my podcast, Matt Terry,
Mm,
and I've done it. I did it once, and then I retested about like 5 months later, and
mm,
it's interesting what came back. I mean, yes,
yeah,
I was definitely a bit dehydrated in the sense that sodium, potassium,
yep,
magnesium were like the main ones that stuck out to me for that
yeah,
I was deficient in. I'm sure that's
yeah.
probably common.
Yeah, no, definitely. Potassium is a massive one. Um, Calcium, magnesium, but it's really the ones that we can't put into a pill or add to our food system as fortification. We've got all these B vitamins that we add to everything, and iron and folate that we add to our food system. But it's really hard to supplement with potassium and sodium even, and like the amount of powder you have to ingest is massive. So you really need to find a way to get those minerals from your diet. Otherwise, similar to protein, I don't know if you heard of the protein leverage hypothesis with Professors Rubbenhammer and Simpson. Basically, they said that they noted that in every organism, we basically eat until we get enough protein, but you see a similar nutrient leverage effect that within every mineral and vitamin to some extent, we keep on eating until we get enough of those
Mm.
minerals, particularly. So, yeah, it's really critical to make sure you've got enough sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium in your diet.
Yeah, and are there certain, like obviously there's a big low carb craze
Yeah.
with keto. I know you talk a little bit about on your blog.
Yep.
I'm sort of implementing actually more carbs into my
Yep.
diet. I've been pretty low carb and fasting for quite a while, and
Yep.
and I find that that adding in good nutritious carbs like whole
Mm.
food carbs, not I'm not going out and having pizza every night. Yeah. But I'm just I'm a big fan of like self-experimentation, finding out
Yeah.
what works. And what are your thoughts around carbohydrates, and how maybe sometimes if you do go low carb for quite a while, that you could be um, deficient in certain minerals and things like potassium and
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everybody's lower in potassium on a processed food diet, but unless you're getting a lot of green non-starch veggies on your version of keto, then you're not going to be getting a lot of those minerals. And then as your insulin drops, as your blood sugar drops on a keto diet, you tend to, release some of those minerals from your kidney as well, because the insulin helps your kidney hold on to the minerals. So you'll sort of lose those minerals. So that's why a lot of people feel a lot better when they supplement electrolyte minerals. But yeah, I mean, pure fat, that back 5 years ago, we were all chasing elevated ketones and testing ketones in our expensive $3 a strip meters and trying to get our ketones higher, thinking that if we ate more fat, elevated ketones would magically lose weight. But I mean,
right.
really, pure fat, we need some omega-3 and a little bit of omega-6, but it's not that much. And that pure fat doesn't contain amino acids and as many vitamins and minerals. So you really need a balanced diet at a micronutrient level. In terms of carbohydrate, I don't know, you're pretty active. So if you're out golfing all the time and really moving a lot, then your blood sugars are going to be dropping. After a workout, your body wants that glucose to replenish that activity. Your muscles need to refill with glycogen. So you'll sort of crave that high carb food. And if you don't, we find some people in our data driven fasting challenges, when they go back to adding a little bit of carbohydrate when their blood sugar is low, they go, yeah, I'm satisfied, I'm satiated because my blood sugar bumped back up into the normal range, and I'm not craving anymore. I'm not eating as much, particularly at night when blood sugars on a low carb diet tend to drop a little bit lower. So yeah, it's interesting. You don't want to overdo carbs, and like you say, you don't want to overdo the pizza and those sorts of donut, handfuls of nuts or whatever, which are really carbs and fat together. But a little bit of carbs when your blood sugar is low to replenish the glycogen after you've actually done some activity is not going to be a bad thing for most people.
Yeah, and it's interesting looking at the charts with your nutrients like calcium and phosphorus and the inverse relationship between that and obesity.
Yeah.
Like how there's been this decline in use of, let's just say, calcium and like you mentioned, potassium is a big one, and how
Mm,
obesity's gone on the rise, and that's probably a combination of just the industrialized let me try saying this the industrialized food system, right? Of like
totally.
just the more something's processed, you're taking out the nutrients, right?
Yeah, and what we've done with our food system back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, we discovered fossil fuel fertilizers. And went, wow, we can grow food so much quicker. We just dump this, fossil fuel based fertilizer that comes from natural gas, but it's getting a whole lot more expensive really quickly right now. Dump it into the soil and make everything grow a whole lot quicker.
Mm,
But not only, when it grows quicker, it doesn't extract as much nutrition. And when you grow things quickly again and again in the same soil, it depletes, and the fertilizers accelerate the loss of topsoil, and there's no diversity, there's no microbiome diversity in the soil, so that the actual nutrient content of that food is getting worse and worse and worse. So we just band-aid it to make the label look better with a few, bit of fortification, but it really doesn't help that much.
yeah. Yeah, that's another topic that probably doesn't get discussed as much, is just the soil quality.
Yeah,
So even if you're, I mean,
massive.
right, and so it's like even if you're buying what you're thinking are foods that are maybe higher in nutrient density and have these maybe the sodium and potassium that you would
Mm.
necessarily want, they might not even have that percentage because of the bad soil.
Yeah, you really want to seek out the foods that taste amazing because they've got the nutrients that you know that are actually extracted from the soil. And those foods are often grown in a regenerative environment where the animals and plants are sort of more combined together, that actually builds back the life and the microbiome of the soil, because the plants and animals are together, rather than our modern food system has just separated them completely, and both have become liabilities because we're trying to do it so quickly to feed so many people. But how long is that going to last
Mm.
with the resources we've got?
Yeah, and turning subjects a little bit, about you have an interesting blog about factors that influence satiety regarding carbs, fat, fiber, alcohol, sugar,
Yeah.
and caffeine. I'm like, oh, these are all things probably people are interested in. So, um, you touch on here, do carbs make you fat? I'm curious your opinion of that. I know there's a lot of differing opinions regarding that.
Yeah, short answer is no, as long as we're
Right.
within the overall energy balance. But what happens when we overdo carbs? We overfill our glucose fuel tank. We get blood sugar goes up, blood sugar falls down below what we're used to, and at that point, we tend to have more intense cravings and make poorer food choices. So it's not really that the insulin is making us fat from that one carb meal. It's more that, hey, you get hungrier when your blood sugar crashes. So people who are insulin resistant, we in our challenges we guide them, if their blood sugar rises more than 30 milligrams per deciliter, 1.6 millimole after eating, to dial back the carbohydrate just to get a more stable energy level. But swinging to the other extreme isn't great either. If you go all carbs are bad, even protein spikes insulin, so I'm just going to drink fat. Fat is not satiating as well. And you can see in that post that basically the higher percentage of fat in your diet, the more you're going to eat. It's a pretty straight relationship, whereas with carbohydrate, the greatest intake is between like 40-50% non-fiber carbs, and that's really, the rest is fat. And then that's the donuts and pizza and cookies that we all love to eat. But once you get down to 10 to 20% non-fiber carbs, that seems to be the optimal point where people tend to eat less.
Okay. And what are your thoughts around vegetable oils? I just did a little bit of a, I, I feel like the arrow's starting to point towards these over-consuming vegetable oils, these seed oils, and these high amounts of omega-6, linoleic acid,
Yep.
as it could be like the main target with regarding obesity. Um,
Yeah.
because it's like the potato necessarily might not be bad, but once it's fried in oil in these oils, then that's when it really can cause some inflammation and uh be sort of the culprit regarding obesity.
Yeah, I suppose the potato chip, the baked potato, is that magic combination of carbs and fat that drive dopamine at a really high level. You get a dopamine response from eating carbs, you get a dopamine response from eating fat, and they fill your carb fuel tank and your fat fuel tank at the same time. Your body goes, I love this food, just keep it coming. It'll help us to survive winter. So I think that's the
Regarding the potato chip.
yeah, yeah. So all those hyper palatable, ultra processed foods are this magic combination of fat and carbs together. So if you're going to avoid anything, it's that, you know, part carb, part fat food that is a big deal. But there's a lot of people that talk about the dangers of seed oils and PUFAs, unsaturated fatty acids, and they've definitely gone from about 3% of our food system to about 8%, but they're not a big contributor at the same time,
Mm.
the way that mono unsaturated fatty acids are. And if you look at fat overall and monounsaturated fat over the last 100 years, it's just gone up and up and up and up and up as we've gone, hey, we can take our industrialized food system, take our seeds and all these different canola and rapeseed and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and create oils from them that we can sell and put into our foods, and they're really, really, really cheap, and they're even subsidized. So I think that's the bigger driver, is just that food manufacturers have found that these monounsaturated seed oils are just incredibly cheap to put into ingredients, and they've just kept on as we've realized that people didn't want their high fructose corn syrup, they said, okay, we can replace that energy with seed oils, with flavorings and colors and et cetera, and just create really cheap foods that we love to eat.
Yeah. It's amazing if you start looking at labels when you go to the store and like you're just, I mean, palm oil and soybean oil and sunflower and rapeseed and, cottonseed. It's like, you know, it's probably in like 90% of packaged goods, I would imagine. Even the ones that you
Yeah.
think are even healthy.
Yeah, it's crazy. And like if you look at the label of an Oreo cookie, it's basically palm seed oil, a bunch of refined starch, refined grains, sugar, and flavors and colorings, and not much else. But that's the basic formula for everything in the center aisles of the supermarket. So if you've got a food with a label that contains those three ingredients, it's basically designed to make you overeat them.
Yeah. What type of good fats should people maybe look for when they're either cooking or eating, as opposed to these these seed oils?
Yeah, interesting question. Definitely omega-3 from fatty fish is something that most people don't get enough of.
Yeah.
Uh, Interestingly, our satiety analysis has indicated that cholesterol, as much as we've feared and demonized cholesterol, when we eat foods that naturally contain more cholesterol, we tend to eat less. So it's just crazy that going back to the SDA dogma and the whole food system dogma that said you should fear saturated fat and cholesterol, and that eliminates most animal-based foods
Mm.
instantly. So therefore, buy our refined, ultra-processed agricultural products, thanks to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, who's promoting the products of agriculture. So um, yeah, so it's just wow. But I don't think you need to go out of your way if you want to lose weight to prioritize saturated fat or monounsaturated fat or any particular fat. It's just, if you're trying to lose weight, then dial back the total fat intake. And if you're trying to gain weight and you run around your golf course and be really active, then a little bit of extra energy from fat will do a great job of fueling that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the list of foods that contain like the most cholesterol, like you got egg yolk, liver,
Yeah,
caviar,
totally.
shrimp,
They're
oyster.
all great foods. You shouldn't
Yeah.
avoid them because they contain cholesterol.
Right, right. Um, what about, well, omega threes you mentioned? So, I mean, caviar actually is on top on the list. They're looking at 23%
Cholesterol.
rich. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
omega three rich.
yeah, yeah,
Sardines, I like sardines. Oyster, salmon, mussels,
yeah.
tuna, shrimp.
Yeah, they're all the foods that we're not getting enough of, and we're not getting enough omega-3. And the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is crazily imbalanced. So, yeah, we're not absorbing our omega-3 that's so important for our brain because it is drowning in omega-6 seed oils from all
Right.
those refined, ultra-processed products.
I also just did a little micro podcast on tips for eating out. What type of tips would you give someone that's eating out? Because I would imagine that restaurants cooking in these seed oils.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm just curious, like what steps would you tell someone if they're eating out, what to do?
Yeah, I suppose choose foods where you can see, there's a steak and there's veggies, and you can see the food that it's not this massive processed glop. But it's fascinating when we go out. I've got two type 1 diabetics in the family now. My son got type 1 in December. Um, and you can see the added everything on the continuous glucose monitor instantly. And it's just like, this is just stuff is full of sugar and the, the vegetable oils. So yeah, it's much harder to eat well if you're not cooking at home and learning to
Yeah.
cook at home. So go out, enjoy yourself. A few meals out won't kill you, but if most of your food's out and you're trusting other people who are making food for a price to give you your food, you're entrusting them with a lot, and it's probably going to be filled with cheap, refined products that aren't going to be great for you.
Yeah. I think that's like that should be top of mind is preparing your own food.
Mm,
I can understand, people who have, obviously kids and they're busy and they're working, and it can be difficult sometimes when you're trying to get that meal in towards the end of the day and you're trying to
mm,
feed like five others.
mm.
I always say, if the best thing to do is just to try to make something like big, like on Sunday,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Do a big batch cook and pre-prepare, and then you're limiting all that decision fatigue through the week. What am I going to eat? Well, I've got a salad that I made five of on the weekend, and I can just, when I'm in the office, you can take the salad and throw some canned tuna or whatever you like on it, and then you get a great meal or leftovers, and yeah, cook up
Yeah.
big at home.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think when you're like decision fatigue, when it's towards the end of the day and you have limited options, I think that's when bad
Mm,
things can happen.
totally, totally.
And like you said, like I have an instant pot and don't use it as much during the summer. We tend to grill and do things like that are outside, but like the instant pot for the winter, I mean, you can make a lot of food
Mm,
and
yeah,
it can last a long time. I've been looking into an air fryer. I
yeah,
don't know
they're
if you have.
great.
Do you have one? Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we use it for the kangaroo patties and just about everything. The oven's broken at the moment, so we use the air fryer all the time. It's a
A-
great way to
And
have.
so, how does it work? How does it cook it? I'm just
Oh, it just forces
like
hot air
magic.
over it. And the it's on a grill sort of thing, so the fat falls through it, so it
Uh,
comes out a whole. You don't have to add a whole lot of extra fat,
okay,
which is
interesting.
good if you're
Yeah,
trying to. If your goal is weight loss.
I mean, you can probably make almost anything on that air fryer, right?
Mm. Yeah, they're great. They're great. We use it a heck of a lot. At least the wife uses it a heck of a lot. She's the amazing cook. I do the numbers with the food.
Oh, she's the cook. Okay.
Nah, she's amazing. Very lucky.
Well, let's talk about two vices that a lot of people have:
Yeah.
alcohol
Yep.
and caffeine.
Oh yeah. I was pleased to see that caffeine. When a lot of people in our challenges go, oh, my blood sugar went up. Is the after my morning coffee? Is that going to spike insulin and make me fat, etc., etc. So, but it was interesting to see in that analysis with about 20,000 days of data from the optimizers that people who had a higher caffeine intake per calorie tended to eat fewer calories. So, it's not like caffeine's making you hungrier. Obviously, if you're having caffeine all through the night and your sleep is trashed and you wake up the next
Right.
day and you're having the coffee and the bagel to pick you up, that's not going to be great. But, caffeine is largely not a bad thing. And there's other beneficial things in coffee. So yeah, don't necessarily fear the caffeine and enjoy your caffeine. Alcohol is, yeah, that was interesting analysis. Basically, when we're inebriated, we're disinhibited and tend to eat more. We're it's often with friends and we're celebrating, and we just tend to make poorer food choices. So I don't think alcohol as a fuel is a bad thing, other than it's basically pure empty calories. But we just tend to be more lax with our diet and tend to overeat. So yeah, the analysis showed that as the alcohol increases, we just tend to eat more. And yeah.
Yeah, and that seems to make sense. I mean, so would you say if someone has a glass of wine, like you're talking about getting inebriated, but what about someone that just has a little bit every night? Did you find with your research anything regarding
Yeah.
that?
Uh, I mean, a little bit of wine is probably not going to be a biggie. And it interestingly drops blood sugars when my wife enjoys wine. I actually don't tolerate alcohol very well and feel a bit trash the next day. But
Well, yeah, I'm like the
when
same way.
when the my wife has some wine, you actually see her blood sugar drop because the system holds back all the stored energy, including the glucose, to allow that alcohol to be burnt off first. So you just got to
Mhm.
understand that it's empty calories. It's a recreational
Right.
thing. It's not going to provide you with nutrition, and it may make you a little less disciplined with the rest of your diet. And your habits may not stick as well at that point.
Yeah. Very true. Yeah, my wife likes to drink wine almost every night, and I'm like, I don't do well with alcohol. I don't know.
Yeah, me too. She seems to handle it fine, but yeah, I enjoy the taste occasionally, but the
Right.
next day I'm always like my brain is not quite as sharp, and it's like I miss thinking really clearly. Can bring that back. So
Hmm.
for me, that's valuable. So I try not to indulge too often.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I know you touch up quite a bit on protein,
Yeah,
and I don't know if it's a highly debated thing. I think in some circles it is. I've had quite a bit of protein individuals on here, like Dr. Don Layman, has
yeah, I
been
heard that. That
studying
was
it.
good interview.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was great. And he talked about the importance of amino acids and
Mm.
in particular leucine. And I'm just curious your take on protein intake and amino acids.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked his comment that rather than seeing protein, we need to
Hmm.
see it as the individual amino acids, and they definitely all have a different role, and you need enough of each, and different foods have a different amino acid profile, and that's where the animal-based foods and the whey protein tend to have a better outcome, that they tend to be a more complete protein source, so you're going to get all the amino acids you need in that protein. But largely, if you're getting enough absolute protein, you're going to be okay. So if you're getting 30% of your diet from protein, 30% of your calories from protein, you don't really need to worry too much about the minutia. But
Right.
when it comes to protein as a macronutrient, it's definitely the most satiating factor in your diet to increase your protein percentage. That's not necessarily more protein in grams. It might need to prioritize protein, but it's more a matter of thinking about, let's dial back the carbs, let's dial back the fat, and prioritize protein. Make sure I'm getting enough protein, and that increases the protein percentage. It's not about eating more butter or more bacon or more donuts to get your protein, because there's very little protein in that. You just have to progressively change your protein sources to just bump up your protein percentage slowly, but not too quickly. If you go too quickly, your body says, "Hey, I needed some energy. Give me some energy." And this protein is really hard to convert to energy. So I'm going to have some mega carb cravings after a few days of 50% protein. So it's like, work out where you are now. Are you taking 20% protein? Let's go for 25. Once you're happy with that and can sustain that for a week, let's go to 30% if you're trying to lose weight. And people just go, "Hey, this is great. I'm not hungry. I'm not thinking of food all the time. I don't have to think about restricting. I'm actually satisfied. I'm satiated, and I'm not having the same cravings at the end of the day."
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about it a little bit on your blog, and you show a picture of a piece of salmon and a donut, and they each have the same amount of calories, right? So
Yeah.
they should just do the same thing, right?
Yeah, they're totally different in your body, and they have totally different satiety responses, different protein, different mineral, different vitamin content. And just because the donut might have a few fortified extra synthetic supplements thrown in that to make the label look better doesn't mean it actually gives you the same effect, especially all the other nutrients that we don't quantify that are probably beneficial in whole food.
Yeah, I think that's why there's a camp of the calories in, calories out. I just think that's too much of a simplified view of it.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Oh, great question. Yeah, I mean, I'm an engineer, so I believe in energy balance. I believe in the laws of physics. Energy balance is a thing. If you eat more energy than you need, you'll get bigger. If you manage to restrict, if you're in a concentration camp and don't have access to food, you will lose weight. But just simply counting calories and setting a limit, saying I'm gonna, I went online and got the target from a calorie counter, a macro calculator, and I'm just going to try and sit under that limit. It just drives you mad eventually. If you don't change what you eat, if you don't manage the macros in what you eat, what you're really trying to do is dial back the carbs and fat while getting enough protein. So if you want to use the glucose in your blood that's building up and you're getting type 2 diabetes, if you want to get rid of the muffin top around your belly, but just the extra fat, you need to dial back the carbohydrates in your diet and the fat in your diet as well, while still getting protein and nutrients. Otherwise, your cravings will drive you mad. And when push comes to shove, your instincts, your lizard brain always win out. So our brain's a really metabolically hungry organ and wants a whole lot of energy.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. You show some great diagrams and just show like, if you're doing 10% protein of your total calories, bumping that up to 40, 50% right there can make a huge difference, because you got to sort of take it from something. And if you just dial back the fat a little bit, maybe dial back the carbs,
Mm.
that can make a profound impact.
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, and most people are down at the 15% protein. 15% is the average protein percentage, which also aligns with the maximum calorie intake. But if you just go from, like I said, where are you now? Let's bump it up just a little bit. If you make great progress, if you're losing it between 0.5% and 1% per week, tick, don't change anything. But if you stall out and need to dial it in a little bit more, let's dial it up to 20% for this week. And that's what we do in the macros masterclass. And it just helps people to lose weight at a sustainable rate that doesn't drive them crazy from a lack of energy that is unsustainable.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Um, well, besides protein, what other sort of are the, I guess, the low hanging fruits that people can dive into, as far as, you know, losing weight, maybe having more energy? Like what I know we talked a little bit about the micronutrients. What are
Mm.
some of the things that sort of come to your top of mind when it comes to, losing fat and maybe just having more energy?
Yeah, I mean, definitely get enough protein from whole foods, and that'll come with a ton of other beneficial nutrients. Non-starchy veggies are also great. They're really impossible to overeat. They're really filling and give you all the vitamins and minerals that are hard to overeat. The seafood is fantastic. Yeah, and it can be helpful to track that in Cronometer for a little while and go, how much protein am I getting? Am I hitting my minimum nutrient target, and how can I, what foods can I prioritize, emphasize to get more of those? Another thing we've been using is data-driven fasting, which isn't really fasting. It's just sort of designed it to, I saw a lot of people overdoing the extended fasting, believing that fasting for longer is better. But when they get to the end, they end up really ravenously hungry. And
Mm.
if they just say, I'm eating keto to keep my insulin down, they're overdoing the fats at that point. So not only have they missed out on the protein while they're fasting, they're overfilling their fat stores and not getting nutrients when they refeed. So this can tend to lead to loss of lean muscle mass and disordered eating eventually. So after a couple of years of watching mainstream fasting, figured that you could use basically a simple glucometer to measure your glucose before you eat to understand what you need to eat and whether maybe you should just wait. So it's a really powerful indicator of, do I need protein because my blood sugar's a bit high? I've got plenty of glucose on board, so I don't need to eat carbs. Or is my blood sugar low? Maybe a little bit of carbs wouldn't be a bad thing to bump my blood sugar back up. If my blood sugar is way above normal for me, I can just wait a bit longer and wait for it to come back down to use that internal stored energy until I actually need to eat. So it's a really nice way of guiding people to dial in when they eat in the day to align with their circadian rhythm and their workouts and their family meals and the like to optimize the eating routine.
Interesting. You talk a little bit about Cronometer. It's actually something I never was one to track, and I've been tracking, and it takes a little while to get used to it and like get into the habit of doing it, because I just never, it's not so, I never track calories. And
Yep.
but I think that it's a nice exercise to do for anybody, even if it's just for
Yeah.
a few weeks, just to see where you're at, what you're getting. Because I found that I was under eating for the most part protein,
Mm.
and probably even calories in general. I know
Yeah.
calories are sort of uh
You need energy to run around the golf course, Brian.
well, I don't run around the golf course, but but I feel like I'm always doing something, so I'm
Yeah.
pretty active. So
Yeah.
um I felt like I was probably under eating, and also under eating protein. So
Yeah.
I've been trying to up it and see how that makes me feel. And that's another point I always bring up, is just sort of that self-experimentation.
Yeah. It's
Um,
fascinating.
there's people, like, I'm going to interview someone tomorrow who's carnivore, and it's been working
Yep.
for him. But
Yep.
there's other people who run better on carbs,
Yeah.
on a higher carb, whole food diet than maybe someone like the individual I'm interviewing tomorrow. So I think there
Yeah.
has to be a little self experimentation. Also, taking getting blood panel work done, and you know um,
Mm.
sort of tracking things just to see where you're at, right?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, blood panels are interesting just because once potassium and sodium and your nutrients in your blood are low, you're really in trouble. Because if your kidney can't retain the sodium and potassium and calcium in your bloodstream, your kidney's broken. Basically, it's not a sign that you have a lower your intake is too low necessarily, but
Mm,
it's a sign that you've got kidney issues. So a better way to do it, like you're saying, is to tracking the chronometer and say, am I giving my body what it needs to do what it needs to do? And if you're giving a little bit too much, then it's really not too much, too much micronutrients from whole foods. It's not really a thing.
right.
If you get too much, your body will just flush it out and say, thanks for that. I didn't need it. But you really need enough of all those micronutrients to make sure you can do everything your body wants to do, everything it needs to do in the short term and the long term, which is really important. I think a lot of people are just getting enough to survive and they feel okay, but the body doesn't have enough micronutrients to prioritize the long term repair mechanisms that are critical for long term survival. But yeah, the do I need carnivore or plant based? It's all fascinating, and different people seem to thrive, and that's been fascinating for me to say.
Yeah.
What are the common elements? And for the carnivores, that's great because they're getting heaps of bioavailable protein. So it works like magic. But then you got Paul Saladino now adding
Hmm.
honey and
Fruit.
whatever else because he needs that glucose to be really active and fuel his activity. And yeah, so
Right.
fascinating to watch the belief-based dogma in the nutrition scene and go, what's common to all of these people? What do they actually need from their diet? Why is it working for them?
Right. Yeah, I tend to like try not to be dogmatic on like my podcast and try to just bring guests and let other people make their own decisions.
Yeah.
And I don't think, and like even like with Paul Saldino, I give him credit because came out with a book and full
Mm,
on carnivore and realized that he was having I think poor thyroid,
mm,
and maybe adrenal uh fatigue, but whatever it was, adding back the fruit and the honey, I believe he added back, really has
mm.
helped him, thrive. So
Yeah, yeah. And everybody's on their own journey, and it's interesting to experiment.
yeah. Well, this was great, Marty. What any lasting tips? I know you're at optimizingnutrition.com and I get your emails, so I know you have like you have a great blog, so definitely check that
Thanks,
out.
man.
What do you have going on as far as I know you have the data driven fasting and you have some micros and macros classes. What
Yeah.
can people learn about? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Data-driven fasting challenge, just using your glucose to guide when you eat, and that's been fantastically popular. People just love the simplicity of just checking their blood sugar before they eat to validate their hunger. And yeah, then we've got the macros and micros class. Dialing in your macros sounds simple, but it's actually quite complex for a lot of people. So just to guide people to track what they currently eat and just nudge that in the direction that they need to go
Mm,
for a few weeks. And like, as you said, tracking sucks forever, but occasionally doing it for a month, learning about your diet, adding new foods that work for you can be really helpful.
hmm.
And then you can live in the free world without it because you understand what actually works for your body. And then with the micros masterclass, which takes that to the next level to help people dial in all their micronutrients and assess what the current intake is and what foods and meals will help them fill in their priority nutrient gaps, which is that the people that dive into that love it. And it's completely fascinating. So I think hopefully that's the next frontier of nutrition. That's the common element that works for everybody. Everybody who's thriving is getting all the nutrients they need from the food, and everybody who's not thriving is probably under eating nutrients and having to overeat food to get those nutrients that they need.
Yeah, and it's and just on the micros like sodium, something like that. It's really like you mentioned, tough to overdo it. Your body's
Yeah.
just going to excrete it.
Yeah. And if you try to have it by the tablespoonful, you'll be off in the toilet and getting rid of it really quickly, along with all the other food that you ate. So,
Right,
yeah,
right.
your body automatically regulates how much you retain and how much tastes good. And hopefully once you get rid of all the processed, hyperpalatable, colored and flavored foods, you can go, okay, I actually have a craving for that right now. And because that's what your body needs. And that was probably how it all worked before we had this industrialized food system.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Marty, thanks for coming a second time around. Glad to see that you've gotten younger over the years.
Cheers, dude.
And probably from your, quitting your day job and just focusing on some things that you love to do here, right?
Yeah, cheers. Yeah, no, pleasure to talk to you, Brian.
And definitely check out his micro masterclass. That's something that I think would be worth everyone's time. So, well, great. Glad we could connect. And thanks for coming on the show.
Cheers. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangrin.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.